Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome, welcome. You can see we have already more than 69 participants on the call. Thank you very much for joining us, and a very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Doreen Odongo. I am the Communications Manager at Award, African Women in Agricultural Research and Development. I am excited to be your host this afternoon as we engage in this conversation on how we can envision systems that address the systemic causes of the persisting gender gap in Africa. Feel welcome. Please engage with us on the chat. Do tell us where you're joining us from. Please tell us your name and the country where you're joining us from. Feel free to engage with us. The chat box is open. And at this point, I'd like to give you an overview of the program. But before I do that, a few housekeeping rules. The webinar is being recorded. I'm sure you saw that notification when you joined. The webinar is being recorded, and we are also streaming live on Facebook. And once it's been recorded, it will be on YouTube. All the participants are muted, but the chat function is open. So you can feel free to ask any questions that you have via the chat function. Engage with us via the chat function, and we'll be monitoring your chat. I think that's all. If there's unless there's anybody else with a question, we also have a few journalists who are joining us who are particularly interested in the conversation, and some of them may be covering these events in various news platforms. All right, so I'll give you an overview of the program. As you're aware, we are having a conversation about the systemic gender gaps across the world and not just in Africa. And we are having this event, this webinar, on the margins of closing ceremony of a program that has been ongoing on for the past 2 months. The leadership program for emerging African women in science. This program is implemented under Award's initiative that is known as Go for Wiser, the Global Forum for Women in Scientific Research. And it's an initiative that seeks to address the systemic causes of the gender gap, envisioned as a platform that brings together different stakeholders to discuss and identify ways of plugging the gender gap in science. So the leadership program for emerging women in science targets women under the age of 35 years. And we have 24 participants from 10 African countries who've been participating in the program. You'll get to hear from some of them towards the end of this program, but today they are completing their 2-month active participation in the program, which sought to build enhanced leadership skills, their scientific writing and communication skills, as well as building their confidence through a coaching program. They participated in a one-on-one coaching program. So the way the program today will run, we'll have a panel conversation, but before the panel conversation, we'll start with opening remarks. Then we'll have a panel conversation. And we will, in the panel conversation, we'll open up for audience engagement through the chat. So I will open up and give an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions to the panelists or to contribute to the conversation that is going on. And then after the panel conversation, we'll get to hear from 3 participants of the 24 who have been participating in the leadership program. And then we will just hear some announcements from the coordinator who has been coordinating the leadership program that is coming to an end. We'll get to know who the trainers were, and then we'll have the vote of thanks and closing remarks from our acting director. So that's the overview of the program. Thank you very much. I see you. I see everyone who is engaging with us on the chat. Keep engaging with us on the chat. At the end of this program, we'll share with you the link to the recording, and we're also going to produce a comprehensive report, which we will avail to everyone. And without further ado, I want to introduce my panelists for the first session of the program. I'll start with Andrea Johnson. Ms. Andrea Johnson is a program officer at the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and she is in the Carnegie Corporation's international program that is supporting the higher education and research in Africa. She previously developed a strategy to enhance women's opportunities and gender equity in African higher education and managed university strengthening activities in Nigeria, as well as designed a capacity building program for African universities. And there is Ms. Andrea Johnson. Thank you for joining us today. Ms. Andrea Johnson has also been trained as a community mobilizer and is a member of the awards steering committee. Thank you for joining us. My next panelist is Dr. Moses Osiru. Dr. Moses Osiru is the manager of the Regional Coordination Units of the Regional Scholarship and Innovation Fund of the Partnership for Skills in Applied Sciences, Engineering and Technology, PASET, as most of us know it. And PASET is a partnership of African governments that aim to train 10,000 African PhDs in 10 years. Osiru holds a PhD in agriculture, plant pathology, and a master's degree in breeding, and was previously a regional plant pathologist at the International Crops Research Institute for Semi-Arid Tropics, that is ICRISAT, which is a city center. Welcome, Dr. Osiru. My next panelist is Ms. Natalie Myampenda. Natalie is the Chief Executive Officer of Kepler. Before joining Kepler, Natalie was the Managing Director of the Next Einstein Forum, an African Institute of Mathematical Sciences Initiative, AIMS. There is Natalie. She's a passionate advocate for competency-based education that skills models that improve learning and employment outcomes for young people. Natalie is passionate about empowering young women leaders as of today and tomorrow. Welcome, Natalie. Natalie holds an honors in international development and globalization from the University of Ottawa in Canada and a master's in strategic communications from Settlehorn University in the United States. Welcome, Natalie. Next, I have Dr. Anthony Aguero. Dr. Anthony Aguero is a program manager, training and community development at Rufora, and a senior lecturer at Makerere University. Anthony has a multifaceted experience in research, including systems ecology and agri-food systems, with a focus on the management of dryland ecosystems, early warning systems, and rangeland monitoring. Welcome, Anthony. And then lastly, but not least, I have Dr. Fiona Mwejes. Fiona Mwejes is the current acting CEO of the Mawazo Institute and also the Director of Programs at the Mawazo Institute. Fiona has extensive experience in developing and implementing multi- and transdisciplinary projects focused on marine biotechnology, sustainable aquaculture, and seafood traceability in Europe, as well as science-based community-led marine conservation initiatives in the Comoros and Kenya. She has a Master's of Biological Science degree from the University of Sheffield, UK, and an industry-based PhD in applied marine microbiology from Bantry Research Station. Welcome, Fiona. So these are the panelists that are going to engage in the first phase of the program, the conversation in the program. And I want to go straight into the opening remarks that will be delivered by Andrea Johnson, who is going to give us, to paint a picture for us by addressing some two questions. One, how can we leverage and strengthen the innovative capabilities of African countries in research and development to mobilize the potentials of women scientists? And two, what opportunities do we have to displace the systemic barriers that continue to perpetuate the gender gaps in science? Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good day to everyone, wherever you are and whatever time zone you happen to be in. I am very pleased to be with you today, and I look forward to listening to the remarks of these incredibly accomplished panelists, as well as to reading the questions and comments from the audience. Before I attempt to respond to the two questions assigned to me, I want to note that in my work at Carnegie Corporation, I tend to refer to research rather than science. It might be a semantic distinction, but science to me tends to conjure thoughts of STEM, restricted to certain subsets of knowledge production. Research, however, opens the door to STEAM, which is far more inclusive, incorporating social sciences and humanities, and I would argue is necessary for tackling the complex problems facing the world today. The first question, how can we leverage and strengthen the innovative capabilities of African countries in research and development to mobilize the potentials of women in science, is particularly difficult to address. Most, if not all, African countries have no shortage of innovators, individuals, and many countries have growing numbers of highly trained researchers, both male and female. Growing these numbers further will take resources. There are now many productive interventions that can be expanded or replicated should resources become available. Many of the bottlenecks within the innovation or science or research systems in countries that stand in women's way can be found at the levels of the organization, the research organizations, and the enabling environment. Beyond the most discussed barriers to women's participation, including lack of support for juggling personal and professional responsibilities, as well as harassment that is experienced by many women, I'll combine others under the general heading of scarcity. A few examples. A scarcity of science education in schools means fewer students, both male and female, can pursue science at higher educational levels. This is where the bottlenecks really begin. Then, a scarcity of secondary schools in general reduces girls' attendance, in part due to the dangers of long distance travel. And this is according to some research that had been done many years ago. The longer the distance to school, the less likely a girl is going to be allowed to go because of all the dangers of harassment, of violence along the route. Then a scarcity of university lectures means either small numbers of students are selected for courses, especially in the sciences, which require laboratory access, or extremely large class sizes, both of which inhibit the development of research skills at early phases of education. And for those who make it through to become researchers, a scarcity of research funds creates unhealthy competition and tends to funnel researchers into funder-preferred research fields. While scarcity affects both men and women, for a variety of reasons, the effects on women tend to be more severe. Research organizations can address some of the barriers, particularly those that address women's physical and emotional well-being and professional development. However, many of the barriers are baked into the broader environment, and it will take commitment not just from governments, but also from the private sector and from the public at large to, for example, prioritize education that is fit for purpose and is widely accessible. This is a justice issue as well as a practical one. The larger the pool, the more people, including women, will be able to go into science careers, research careers. It will also take a great deal of commitment to prioritize research specifically, the process of which is not linear, and the material benefits of which might not be immediately apparent. This is hard for particularly government and policymakers when they have so many urgent crises they have to deal with, to be able to say, we're going to actually look a decade or more in the future when a lot of the research results can be translated into products, services, and just other ways of organizing society. That commitment must be backed up with funding to strengthen research organizations and to support research itself. There are many efforts now to do this, particularly the Science Granting Council initiative that is attempting to form science funding councils in African countries. Applying a gender lens throughout to identify those changes that do the most to increase opportunities for women to contribute to research will help ensure that available resources are well placed. So then, what are some opportunities to displace systemic barriers that perpetuate gaps in science? You'll hear much about these from the expert panel, as well as from the participants from the awards leadership training. The changing systems require many interventions aimed at different parts of the system, such as at the individual level, mentoring women and providing them with opportunities to strengthen their research skills and their professional survival skills, like the kinds of program that Award has successfully run for more than 10 years. There are programs like this in different forms of science, but there needs to be more, and they need to be scaled up and perpetuated, because these are not problems that are going to go away anytime soon. At the program level, which is where many of us operate, mainstreaming gendered approaches that enable women to participate in programs designed for all scientists or all researchers, such as the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa does in its doctoral program. In this example, CARTA has developed a good reputation among women for automatically offering support to new mothers who would otherwise find it difficult to travel for the doctoral seminars that are part of the CARTA model. They've also developed postdoctoral research opportunities for graduating fellows where they have a choice. They can travel to another place to do a more traditional postdoc, or they can receive a very sizable reentry grant that allows them to keep their life where it is, which for women can be complicated because of family responsibilities. So they have that choice so that they don't fall into what happens with a lot of young researchers, get the PhD and then have no opportunities for doing research afterwards. At the organizational level, research institutes can thoroughly review their policies, procedures, and practices to ensure that the environment supports both male and female researchers. It's easier said than done, especially where organizational climate is concerned, but possible with committed leadership. Universities, as research organizations, but with other responsibilities, universities can also engage in this process, but they also need to examine, using a gender lens, of course, staffing structures and expectations for early career researchers in particular. Early career researchers, of course, have often the burden of teaching the most courses. They are shuffled into administration and all of these things, rather than able to focus on research. Here, but essential areas for examination also are curricula. How gender sensitive are curricula across the university? And notions of what constitutes acceptable research. And we could have a whole seminar just on that. This applies across fields to what kinds of research topics are valued, how research questions are framed, what kinds of methods are used, and how research results are reported. Digging deep into what counts as knowledge in the university context. What kind of research is valued affects reward structures, which in turn determine the career trajectories of researchers. While it's not possible to generalize across such a broad population as women, in my experience, women may ask different kinds of questions that need to be researched. But if the university or their employer doesn't value those questions, then what happens to their ability to rise in the ranks? Likewise, people in general, researchers who prefer to work in teams as opposed to individuals, the reward structures tend to be individually oriented rather than research team oriented. There are all kinds of things that need to be looked at because incentive structured reward structures do determine the decisions that people make, including whether to stay in research or in a particular institution. So we get into retention issues. Once you get to the level of policy and enabling environment, individual researchers and research institutions lose a lot of the control. The research sector tends to be at a disadvantage where policy influence is concerned, in part because cause and effect are difficult to demonstrate, especially within short time frames, and also because research as a broad area, science, has few organized advocacy organizations that can represent the sector effectively. So when there's competition over scarce government resources, it's the loudest voices, the strongest advocates that tend to get the attention. Research often does not come out on top in those discussions. Under such conditions, communications become essential. So Doreen, this is for you. Not so much general statements about the importance of research in solving problems, but actual examples of research results and ongoing research that relates to problems that policymakers are actively addressing. And for those trying to create space for women, making the work of female researchers highly visible creates role models so girls can see research as a viable occupation, and highlights the distinct contributions that female researchers are making to solving society's problems. Both can help to change attitudes about women and their place in science and research. So now I've rambled on quite enough. I'll stop here, and I'm looking forward to listening to the real experts, those frontline workers who are on this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrea. I am getting a notification that my network bandwidth is low. For that reason, I've decided to deactivate my video for now. Thank you so much for painting that picture for us. And you have really brought out that the issues are more complex, and they start right from the early education level, where you're saying the bottlenecks begin early. There's scarcity in science education in schools, which means that there's scarcity in higher learning institutions, there are fewer lecturers, and it goes on and on into the workspaces. And by the time it gets to the policy areas, policy spaces, it's even more complicated. It's a completely different ballgame, you know, and they lose control, and then highlighting the importance of investing in visibility and in communication. And I'm excited to hear that, because those are some of the issues that our Go For Wiser program is addressing. And I believe we're going to touch on some of those with some of the panelists that we have here today. And so to our participants, I see you on the chat. Keep engaging with us. I forgot to mention that we are tweeting, we are on social media, so we are engaging our audiences on social media through the hashtag Women in Science and hashtag Aspiration. So please feel free to tweet away. We also have interpretation services for our non-English speaking participants. We have French available, interpretation in French available. So for the French speaking participants, feel free to click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen to access the conversations in French. All right, so we want to switch gears and we want to hear more from the panel of experts that we have today to discuss the subject of the gender gap in science, and what are some of the strategies that we can scale up? What are some of the things that we should stop doing? What is it that has worked before? And how can we have a system? Because as Andrea has rightly said, this is a systemic issue, and it starts way early, and how can we address them? And now I want to turn to Dr. Moses Osiru, who is operating at the higher level of empowering African scientists. What specific actions can institutions undertake to become more inclusive and welcoming spaces for women in science? Having seen the kind of challenges that they go through for them to even make it in science in the institutional level, what are some of the actions that institutions can undertake to support them?
Thank you very much, Doreen. I hope you can hear me, just to confirm, please.
I can hear you, Moses. Go on.
Excellent. I mean, I think this question is a big one because one could approach it from many different angles. And I thought before trying to answer the question, I should first reflect a little bit on what exactly institutions are should be trying to do, because I think that's probably one of the key issues. And again, as you mentioned, I want to speak about this from the perspective of higher education, postgraduate studies, because we're talking about science and getting women into science careers and some of those systemic challenges. So three things I want to mention. First of all, I think this issue about the misconceptions about really what these gender issues are and maybe I should phrase this in terms of the gender roles as well as the gaps, both in the family and in the community, because particularly in Africa, we are changing from a more rural type of life to a more, if I may call it, a westernized or urban way of living. And this is also changing the way we behave in the home. So this is one issue. The second one, I think, is about the timing, particularly for postgraduate studies, that if women want to get into science, it's a time when also many of us, and I say us, I speak about families, want to start having children. And so postgraduate studies also falls at the same time of childbearing. And then the third one, I think, is one probably I call again a misconception, that we know that there's a misconception that automatically women and men will benefit if things are left the way they are. So I think those are the key issues I wanted to mention first. And then related to that, I also wanted to highlight some issues that we also found from a recent survey that we did amongst both our students and also other, largely on PhD students. One of them is that we realized that faculty at universities already have an unconscious bias against women when they're doing things, for example, like recruitment and selection. So that I think is one key issue. Then the second one is also that we also found that many times even family members themselves play a role in discouraging women. So this is a major challenge that we found amongst many women who are doing PhDs, that they're actually being discouraged many times by family members. And at the same time, they're struggling with trying to get a kind of, they want to be supported by their spouses. And so there's this type of fear sometimes in terms of how there's a pressure that they sometimes hide their achievements. And this is something, again, that we found quite critical for what needs to be done to overcome these challenges. So the other three things I think I want to mention quickly is that we found, interestingly, that women were slower at finishing PhDs. And part of it, I think, is this issue about the work-life balance because of having children, etc. The other one also we found is that they also were slower at publishing, that men published much faster than women did. And then lastly, I think this issue, about taking longer to finish their PhD. So from that, then let me go back to what we found to work. And this is not really from our perspective. Institutionally, we know that programs in the past have already been doing this for a long time. So some of the things that we know already work. We know that pre-entry programs work, where you have mechanisms that are getting people to understand what's happening before they actually get to entering into these postgraduate programs. We also know that sensitizing people who are managing programs also work. So people like myself, but also within higher education institutions, they need to understand the issues so that the unconscious bias does not creep into them. And linked to this then is the issue of policies. I think in many cases also ensuring that we have policies that are effective at enhancing both genders, and particularly now in this case we're trying to enhance women, their participation. But of course we also have to look at both sides of the coin. So we have a number of strategies that we are using, and probably this is not the time that we'll get into each one specifically, but I will mention broadly. The first is about trying to ensure that we can increase the enrollment of women. And for this, we're looking at things like awareness, advertising. We're trying to target them specifically. So we use, for example, platforms like Award, like OWSD, and many of the other institutions that work with women. Secondly, we want to improve the postgraduate student experience for women. And there are lots of things inside this bucket, including accommodation facilities, being able to travel with your family. So many of those other issues are also inside there. So again, I won't get into the detail because of time. The third is to improve the PhD performance of women. I would say women and men, but in this case of women. And some of the things like we've already talked about, things like mentorship. We ourselves, both as men and also as senior scientists who are both men and women, recognize the importance of mentorship. I was speaking with Anthony earlier, but even I myself have benefited from people like Andrea and many others in terms of how we are able to move forward in the things that we're doing. And then lastly, to support women to finish on time. Because I think if people don't finish on time, there's a larger chance that someone will just drop the PhD or drop, and many women don't finish their studies simply because they're lagging behind. And because of that lagging behind, without adequate support, you find someone decides to just drop out of a program. So let me pause there because I know there are many things to say, but let me pause there for now. Over to you, Doreen.
Thank you, Moses. Thank you for outlining the findings that you found from your study. And I'm wondering whether that study is available for our audiences to interact with it further. If you can share with us the link on the chat, or if you can share it with us and we'll include it in the email that we'll share with our participants for today. And Natalie, I want to turn to you. Moses has started touching on some of the challenges that women are facing and how they are addressing them. And Andrea had said that while there are challenges that face researchers and scientists, women are disproportionately affected. And so for you, and now have been working with Kepler, in higher learning institutions, what key ingredients do you think funders of postgraduate students, particularly female students, consider to fast-track career development? We've heard that they take longer to finish. We heard that they're more, they're also slower to publish. So what key ingredients do you think funders should take into consideration?
Okay, thank you, Doreen. It's an interesting question because I think I'm going to the second question that we're going to discuss is how do you build a community? But my experience at the time when I was at the Next Science Forum is I saw a dramatic increase. We saw a dramatic increase in the publishing of PhD and postdoc students, female researchers, or as part of a community where you are, I would even say, informally mentored, encouraged. You look at what other people are doing. So a community is very important, and I'll come back to that a bit later. But even on some practical things that can be done by funders and institutions. I've a couple, 2-3 years ago, when L'Oréal Women in Science launched their Women in Science program for Africa, they had training that they did for their talent. I think it was the Women in Science talent pool. 25 women who came from all over Africa, selected from different parts of science specifically. And they got a week of training. And the week of training included leadership, it included negotiation, introduction to negotiations. And this is not just, this is even HR negotiations on your contract. They got introduction to communications. So how do you present yourself? How do you take content that's highly complicated and make it very simple so for non-scientific audiences could understand? And it was very interesting because I sat in on the training. I was there as a partner, but I sat in on the training, and the transformation between day 1 and day 5, both in terms of confidence and plans and what am I going to do after this, was very dramatic. So I think that for funders, beyond funding the actual program that the female candidates are doing, it's very important to fund these other important coaching mechanisms in communication, in leadership, and also I think that life coaching in general is a key part of any person's life as you grow, because at some point you will, if you are able to continue through your PhD and your postdoc and climb through academic ranks, if that's what you want to do, or even in the lab, you might be running a lab, you might be running other women, other female researchers. And there is a complaint I hear often about from postgraduate students, female students who say other female heads of department don't help us. And so keeping that in mind, it's very important to get some leadership coaching and other training. I come from a communications background, and I spent a lot of time training scientists around how do you express yourself. And as Andrea said, not just the art of public speaking, but actually how do you take complicated information and make it something that is digestible at a policy level. So you're calling people to action. That's what we worked a lot on when I was at the Next Einstein Forum. And I also want to talk about the family setting. So, you know, our degrees are at the undergraduate level, but we operate, one of our campuses is in a refugee camp. And we noticed that the female students who got in, we worked very hard to get them in. We have preparatory programs to make sure that they're leaving high school, they're coming into our undergraduate program. They get into the program and they're doing poorly. And poorly we mean because we're competency-based and it's self-paced, so failure is not really the issue there. It's more like they're what Moses said, they're not finishing. So the degree is supposed to be done in 3 years or 4 at max, and they're taking long. And so when we investigated, we found that it was a problem at home. So the husband felt most of the time, my wife is lagging on her responsibilities at home. And therefore the wife, to compensate, would say, okay, I have to reduce some of these activities of school here. And we were finding that they were behind. So one of the things we introduced is that at the very beginning, and quite regularly, we had these like family orientation kind of events where you have a conversation with the husband, sometimes in groups, sometimes personally, to talk about the impact and how, you know, what will it mean for the family overall once the woman graduates, and the benefits to the family. And I would say in a larger context, in postgraduate, it would be interesting to see what could be done if there are like family days like that, where it's not individual, but you have groups of women talking about their research and the relevance of it to a wider group, so people can be proud of their spouses. The second thing is traveling with, I think was mentioned by Moses, having programs where if the wife is traveling for a conference, can she go with her family? So that the family really sees the value that is being brought by this female researcher, I think is critical. And then we'll talk more about the community side, but I think one of the challenges, so we at Kepler have been really thinking through the fact that we don't have enough academic staff who are women. And if they are, they've just started, as Moses talked about, because they're taking longer to finish their degrees. So what do you do in that case? What are you working on to make sure that there's a path, a clear path, where the people who are supervising them understand part of their KPIs is to make sure that they are actually getting women across the finish line. So I was very clear with the academic department that if we are not promoting, or we're not fast tracking, or there's no clear path for our female academic staff, or female teaching staff, then there is a problem. And so your KPIs as a head of department is linked to that aspect of diversity. So I'll stop there and maybe talk a little bit more about the community a little bit later.
Thank you, Natalie. Today is the day my network bandwidth decided to be very low, and I'm consistently getting that message, but I hope you can all hear me okay. Natalie, what I'm hearing from you is that we need a more intentional approach. The funders should be more intentional in an inclusive approach, recognizing that the females students don't come from a vacuum. I mean, they come from a social context. What about their families? How can they be involved and be made aware of the expectations of some of these postgraduate programs that they are undertaking? And I want to turn to Dr. Aguero. Sometimes we spend a lot of time, you know, saying we are fixing the women, yet the environment itself is not really enabling. And what would you say are some of the critical incentives, you know, or enabling environment conditions that are needed to address these systemic causes? How can we make the environment more enabling? What are some of the critical incentives that we need to have in place?
Okay, thank you very much, Doreen. I think I should, as I go towards the response of that question and the issues around it, a couple of these have already been highlighted by both Natalie and Moses, and also earlier on mentioned by Andrea. And one thing first, we need to continue to recognize that there is this huge pipeline leakage of of the STEM process, right from primary school to joining to secondary school, and from secondary school to the university, we lose a couple of persons along the way. But then the question is, should we just be looking at the gender issue in STEM as only the question about women? What about the persons with disabilities? What about these part and parcel, perhaps for me, of persons to be added into the conversation around this gender issue, because they, in one way or the other, really face more or less, or even more, a bigger bottleneck. But that said, let me attempt to respond to some of the things relating to the issues around the incentives, based on some of the things and the challenges that have already been highlighted, and those that could perhaps help to improve the situation. I would like to start with the one which has been very fundamental to me and really very transformative to myself: mentorship and mentorship. Mentorship is a very critical process to ensure that both in terms of the environment as well as an incentive. I happen to have finished, many people have different experiences around masters and PhD, their journey and so forth, but I happen to have finished both in time. And because I had a very strong group of persons around me that accepted to provide a strong mentorship ecosystem, I finished my PhD in 3 years. And that for me is, I can only attest that mentorship is a very strong component. And we need not only good male mentors, but we also need to begin to appreciate that we need a stronger group of female mentors that are willing to walk the journey with the female colleagues in various levels. And so mentorship becomes a very, very strong instrument for getting many, many young people to believe in themselves and in their ability to pursue a STEM career. The second issue that I would like to raise as part of around the environment is around science education. And science education basically, and this goes into components of teacher training and teacher education. A couple of us, I am a teacher by profession. I trained as a teacher. And so I love to teach. But one of the things that is common is that many of you or many of us apply to the School of Education to train as a teacher comes as a last resort. So we enroll in those faculties, most people who don't that they should be in the. So supposing we flip it this way, the persons who go to the School of Medicine should be, I see my bandwidth is complaining, so I just need to mute the video. Supposing we flip it that way, that we enroll the best and the brightest in the School of Education to become teachers, and teachers who are able to facilitate learning. How will it influence the way we can begin to see more adults? So if we have persons who are not dedicated to education and teaching as a vocation, then they become an instrument of moving many more young people out of this thing. Not just forgetting that it becomes much more higher for the female students. So we need to deal with that issue. We have been browsing over it for so long, but we need to focus on it, and that becomes also goes along with the issue of teacher remuneration. In Canada, the average salary of a teacher is about $50,000. In Uganda, it's about $1,700 a year in secondary school. So how do you begin to compare the two? So these are some of the things we may need to begin to fix. Now, that issue, I would like to environment within universities, both for females and males. How I saw a comment from, I think, Eta on chat that slower to finish, slower to publish is sexist. But this is the environment we have been living and we live on. Most of the colleagues, even in universities, are senior colleagues with the difference between sexism and gender and so forth. So you might be thinking that they are aware, they do things unconsciously. So how do we begin to put within university environments an environment that allows for growth, allows for a proper career ladder, allows for progression, that is able to create and bring different genders, both male and female, to work together. And for the male colleagues who have already moved it to realize that they hold a strong burden to pull up their female colleagues who may need that part of the support process. And also the female colleagues that have gone far ahead to know that there is smooth processes within within the institutions and flexibility of training, and need to accept within our context. When you want female, that is most of the time married, and so they sacrifice and move out to enroll. And even those who may get enrolled, there are social patriarchal challenges that will make them drop off. So how do we build a system and an ecosystem that allows us to ensure that there is flexibility? You are able to accommodate somebody with their child and perhaps provide a nanny to help her during the process of her study. There are issues around security and safe spaces within the institutions and institutions of higher learning. We need to put that and take care of that so that women feel safe and they don't feel issues around sexual harassment or sexually abused and all these kind of things that would potentially reduce their potential for achievement. Now, there is another conversation that we need to bring on table. Leadership, women in leadership. It's very transformative because they are very focused, they are strong, but we need to ensure that this part of the equation is sorted, is fixed, is existing within our universities and our institutions of higher learning, as well as in our secondary schools. We need to begin to see people believe and see women in leadership, not just that they are secondary, that they are coming because it is affirmative action. It has to be a deliberate effort to ensure that women in universities and education institutions are really part and parcel of the conversation in the leadership process. I would like to end by saying that we need to recognize and ensure that we recognize women that make it, profile them more, give them the platform. They need to be seen, they need to be heard. That plays a strong inspirational role. For many of us, we are using smartphones. For many of us, you are using GPSs in those phones that we are having, but it was a woman who was behind the GPS technology. We hardly and rarely talk about it, but we need to profile our own women within our context, within the African system, so that people can believe and see the value that it is possible to make it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Really, indeed, very important points. You talked about mentoring. You've also alluded to the fact that some of these issues are policy issues that require us to act at a higher level and engage our policymakers. What kind of policies are there? You've talked about ensuring our workspaces are safe spaces. And for me, that brings to mind another question that we need to address about accountability. Because some of these things we've been talking about them, about policies, about safe spaces, but are we holding these decision makers accountable? Are we holding ourselves accountable, every actor? And I'll come back to you later to tell us, as one of the apex body that is charged with the mandate of overseeing graduate training, what are some of the key issues or real things that True Forum is doing? So we'll come back to that. I'm seeing a lot of engagement in the chat. Please keep engaging. There's a whole conversation there about the age limit. I would like to see how that ends. But if you have a specific question to a panelist, please post your questions on the Q&A chat, and we'll be able to see it, and the panelists will address it. So please do post any question that you want addressed through this panel conversation in the chat. In the interest of time, I'm going to go to Fiona, and then because I've only seen one question in the Q&A which has been addressed, I will skip the Q&A round and go to the second round of questions to the panelists. So Fiona, we've had about retaining, women in the workplaces, and the challenge. Well, it could be a challenge, but women do get there. But it's not just about them getting there; it's also about them staying there. Yeah, they go there, but they don't stay. And so, what are some of the adequate measures that can support them to actually not just get there, but also stay?
I mean, firstly, sorry, I dropped off there for a second. My Wi-Fi just decided to go on me, so I've just joined with my phone. But yes, how can we make sure that women are staying, staying at higher academic institutions, are staying within their postdocs, and staying beyond postdocs into professorships, et cetera. And I think my fellow panelists have touched on a lot of things that can be done already. I think I can just only, really double down on some of the things that have already been said with regards to, tackling gender stereotypes, making sure that we really change this kind of perceived notion of what scientists look like, and really trying to really, push it in people's faces that African women belong in these places. And part of that has got to do with public engagement. I think Natalie already touched on this as well, with trying to change the way we express our research so that we're able to talk and speak the same language, not only as the general public, but also with policymakers and things like that, so that our science goes beyond just academia. But more so, I think, with ensuring the retention is changing policies. We need to really enact gender-sensitive policies in higher education institutions. Again, this is the fellow panelists have touched on some of these things, but it's having policies in place that really keep in mind and are mindful of the fact that women have a lot of responsibilities beyond their PhDs, beyond their postdocs, beyond their academic their academic positions. And is there a way that universities could be a bit more conscious, or higher education institutions could be a little bit more conscious about these things? I think the other side of things is the financial part, and I think there's been a lot of discussion in the chat about the age limit, not only for funding, but also for any kind of opportunities to, for research funding, but also for just support. A lot of these programs have age limits, with the idea being that we want early career, we want to really help them at the beginning of their career so that they can really advance. And I think it's a great discussion, and it's something even at the Mawazo Institute we've really started to think about more and really concretely discuss, why do we have an age limit, and is that contradictory to what our mission is, which is supporting women in research, when in fact a lot of the times our research can be delayed and is delayed, and we end up going into PhDs later, going into postdocs later. So it's definitely a very important point that I think, starting at home at Mawazo, we need to really kind of look into and see how we can ensure that we're we're not doing that, that we're kind of contradicting what our mission is. I think there, that being said, I think research for not only PhD level, but also for postdocs, for people wanting to start their own labs, their own research groups, women just all over the world, this is not an African issue. I think it's just women just, either it's a case of, whether it's playing back to the first point of gender stereotyping, the fact that we don't feel that we have the competencies, we're not confident enough to go for these things. And the other side, I guess, is ensure maybe doing a bit of more affirmative action about it, like making sure that X percentage of research funding is given to women. Are these the things that we could already be doing, And I think there's also a point about mobility. The fact that being mobile it allows you to attract more funding. If I've done a postdoc elsewhere and I've done a secondment, in South Africa, and then I've gone over to Canada and done something, maybe I'm more attractive to potential funders to fund my research. My network is going to be larger. In reality, how many women at that level have the freedom to do that and travel? Are we, is there any encouragement for people to travel with young families or even with their families in general, so that we can do these things? I think that would be something interesting to look into. And yeah, on the other side, just even at the PhD level, a lot of research is being funded out of pocket by women. It's being paid by savings, it's being paid maybe with family support, family money to try and get women through PhDs. So I think, overall, I think there just has to be a little bit more discussion about whether we can really cater to ensuring funding is being directed to women, so that they can stay within the higher education system. I think there was a point earlier on being made about I've forgotten now. I'll try to get to that. I'll try to get back to this point made earlier that I wanted to connect to this, but it's now escaped me a little bit. But moving on to another point that I think would really help to retain us in higher education is sort of this complementary training that needs to be done, whether that's training in leadership, training in fundraising, how to write good proposals, how to manage budgets, how to do general project management, and then related to that also how to build our networks. Not only build our networks within our fields or with our peers within our fields, but also a network of just women who support each other through our journey in science. I think that would be one of my points too. I think there was a study done earlier, I think in 2014, that really showed that like roughly 60% of African researchers had never received any formal leadership training. 65% had never received mentorship on fundraising and leadership, and 63% had never received mentoring on career decisions and getting a job. And 49% had never been introduced to key research networks. Like, that's crazy, And and going back to the mentorship point that has also been mentioned by my fellow panelists, mentorship is so important, particularly as even in the chat, there's been a lot of talk about like I had inadequate supervision, there was not enough support through my PhD or even through master's degree programs. And it's a question of whether mentorship could fill that gap. Good quality mentorship could fill that gap. Mentorship not only from fellow scientists in the field, but really doing very thoughtful, careful matching of mentors for female PhD students and postdocs, and matching them with mentors who can really guide them and fit with their needs, And at Mawazo, that's something that we've really learned from this year. We did a very intensive matchmaking process for our mentorship program, and the results, when we put in all that work, we were really worried, like, are we just overthinking this and putting in too much effort into setting this up? But it paid off. It really paid off, just really being very careful and very very precise and very, focused on what we were doing with the mentorship program and making sure that we were matching mentees and mentors who really were complementary. That really was helpful. Going back to the point of just this training, this complementary training that is not, field specific. That's something again at Moazo that we're really trying to perfect and improve, or that since we first started, and we feel like it's been, the feedback just from our beneficiaries has been that it's been very useful, especially things like budgeting and financial management, like how to write proposals, how to manage your grants, things like that. These are things that are just give them that extra edge to remain very competitive researchers within their field and stay within academia, but also translate all their research into private sector, public sector, policy, etc. Yeah, and I guess I'll reiterate and kind of double down again on the networking. I think this is so crucial. I think it kind of would answer a lot of these different approaches. Like having a good network is going to allow for peer-to-peer mentorship. It's going to allow you to reach and access opportunities that you might not have heard of, if you weren't part of this network. It allows you to kind of do more interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approaches to your science because you've got this network of people from different fields. And also just the confidence building, if you, as a woman, if you're surrounded by other women who are doing incredible things, I feel like it just lifts you up and you feel, that, okay, I can actually do this, and build that confidence because we've got all these other, obstacles in our way. Being together and creating this kind of sisterhood, or this community of fellow women supporting, I think that's super important too.
Okay, all
Thanks,
right.
Irene.
Thanks, Fiona. You've what I'm hearing you say is also the need to be consistent for those actors who are there trying to help in plugging this gender gap. Consistency, but also is it time to challenge some of the policies or requirements that we've been promoting but don't seem to really help us advance our agenda, like the gender gap, the age limit, for example. And there's a whole campaign on the charts about lifting the the age limit. So is it time to also challenge some of those things? And then there's a question that I also want to pose to the audience and to everyone here, if we can discuss it on the chat, about accountability, because it's really important for us to also try and hold some of these decision makers and key actors accountable, but also for ourselves. Fiona, you've rightly said that for you at Moazo Institute, you're also now you're walking the talk and you're challenging yourselves at home in-house. Are you, what purpose is age limit, for example, serving? So starting just to remain accountable. And I want to go to the next question, which Fiona had actually started talking about mentoring. And this, I was going to ask Moses to, just tell us how we can implement mentoring as an underlying principle. We've been talking about it consistently, and it seems to be a very, very valid area of concern that we actually need mentoring, and we need to have structured mentoring programs. But how can we implement it as an underlying principle for our learning institutions and our places of work?
Thanks a lot, Doreen. I think this is it's for me, I say it's a difficult question, because maybe just to be clear that within our program, we're currently in the process of setting up an online system to support mentoring for not only women, but also men. And it's something that I've also been getting a lot of input from many, including from Andrea. And Andrea, thanks a lot, as well as many others. So we're in the process of designing that, and I'm sure even at award we'll come and get more input. I think, as you said, mentoring is critical, and many people have mentioned it in this discussion. And I think we need to learn from Doreen, for example, from your program. Award, I think, has one of those interesting arrangements for mentoring that many women, many scientists seem to have found very useful. And so certainly there needs to be a mechanism to get people to be able to find mentors. to be able to engage with their mentors, and then to be able to also recognize how mentoring should be done. So in terms of building capacity for mentoring, both from the mentor and the mentee, because I think all of us need this type of support. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, our challenges, and I noticed the same from the chat, our challenges emanate not just from the PhD process and master's, whatever studies we're doing. They come all the way back from where we come from, our family backgrounds and etc. Because of the way we have what has been ingrained into our minds about how the roles and responsibilities of men and women have become. And I think that's part of the challenge. So if you allow me to digress further and say even that I believe that, for example, the issue of our own families is critical. I believe that many successful women, and I put in brackets again, and men, are successful because of the support they get in their homes from our spouses, etc., etc. And the reason why I think even now many men are doing well, personally, I think a lot of my success is because of what my wife has supported me with. And I think even now I'm also trying to do the same for her. But it means that we men have to begin to learn how to cook, learn how to take care of children, learn how to wash dishes, etc., to be able to give women time to do some of the things that they also need to do to achieve and to build successful careers. So I think I've kind of gone roundabout, but I think that the issues are very intertwined, and we can only solve some when we are able also to solve some of the societal issues that we have. The second thing I just want to quickly use the chance to say is that the issue of getting support for women also is linked to the availability of funding. We have been, for example, struggling to deal with the issue of one is the age limit, because I see a lot of it in the chat. And we actually were requested by the ministries of education who provide support to PASET. And they actually made sure that the age limit was put back into our program. We tried to remove it, and it was put back. And it was put back for two reasons. One was an issue of what was it now? They were saying that they wanted people who are trained to go back into their research and training institutions to be able to give back, so to speak, to work, because it's an investment by the government. It's not a gift, but it's an investment for the government. So that was one of the major reasons that they gave. And then also the second one was we are getting difficult to get funding for things like family support, because our strategy has it, but many times when we go to donors, they tell us that, we're not able to support the whole family. We're only able to support the PhD holder, but not anyone else who would go with them. Sometimes even including children, to provide an extra additional ticket for children, sometimes it's not possible. And that is not because of us, the program, but because the funders who are funding the program are not able to. And I'm sure there are also valid reasons for it. So it's not, we shouldn't be quick to blame them. There's usually also a valid reason. If you look at it from the other side, there's also some reason. So it's not as straightforward as sometimes we'd like to make it. Over back to you, Doreen. I apologize for going beyond your question you asked.
Thank you, no problem, Moses. I'm looking at how fast time is moving, and I want to switch the questions a bit. I want to talk about the issue of networks, and I'd like to bring in Natalie and Fiona to talk about the issue of networks. And one for Natalie, you had started talking about it, and Fiona just touched on it as well. How can we build robust, sustainable networks of women in science? And then after that, we're going to ask Fiona to tell us how we can then leverage existing networks, because there are networks and there are platforms. Yeah. First, how do we build a robust and sustainable networks, and then how do we leverage the ones that are existing?
Okay, so now that I'm sort of out of the ecosystem, I'm going to give you a couple of things that I think that one, I would have done better, but I also think that are challenges to the wider community or ecosystem within research funding in Africa. The first is, I think that a lot of mentorship, one, I don't think we understand what mentorship is, successful mentorship, and a lot of the funded programs are not doing well. And I think part of that is because various institutions, whether they're new or existing, instead of looking at how can we work with existing institutions or existing programs, they create their own program, they seek out their funding, they have some of their mentees in the last 2 years, it shuts down. So I think part of it is an institutional weakness around how do funders and how do institutions accept to join other stronger networks to help them achieve their goals, and how do funders find out which networks are working. And so I think that's a critical point, but that's a more global view. The other thing I want to mention quickly before I come back to networks is, I was a non-mathematician and non-science trained. I think Andrea brought that up. I'm a social scientist by background, and I didn't even pursue a PhD, although I will likely pursue it soon. And one of the things I noticed is that, I was doing all the research writing, the grant writing. I was doing all the training of people. I was helping create these networks, but the value of which that was given to various members within departments is not the same. And so someone who has a PhD in mathematics, who has zero experience raising money, has a couple of issues against his own sexual harassment, would come and say something and they'd be like, yeah, that's great. And what you have been working on would not be of value. And this is something that women see much more clearly than men. And so I think the reason networking is important, and I think networking or building of communities of female scientists, female researchers is important. Number one, I would like to really encourage people to understand the plurality of the value of knowledge creation beyond your labs or beyond your research. And so just as a female researcher, being open to various inputs of knowledge is very important. Listen to the people who are raising the money. Listen to the people who are training you on other things like communication and leadership, because they will build your career. Number two, quickly, I also think that, I was reading in the chat, and it was very interesting. Someone made the comment, some of us are publishing more than men, etc. And often women who are very successful for various reasons, they went to the right institution, they have some other privileges that allow them to go to better schools. You often say, hey, I have other problems. It's not children, but the systemic, you have benefited actually from a lot of women who have struggled through the system and have allowed some women to excel, or you have other privileges that allow you to excel. And so if you have those privileges, if you have that access, it's important to join networks that need you. And I think the responsibility of female researchers, female scientists, female leaders is that. The reason, very quickly, networks are important. When we started the Next Science and Forum, there was no network. So it was more like we needed funding. We wanted to do this conference where we talk about the impact of science on society. We did a lot of training with the scientists. We had the issue of age limits. We actually raised the age limit because of this point, but we were never able to tackle it completely out. As Moses said, our funders just refused. And so we were dealing with issues as it came, much more flexible because we were not linked to an academic institution, which allowed us, or governments like Moses, which allowed us to be a bit more flexible. But as the community grew to like 200 top scientists in Africa, they kind of so we provided continuous training, we provided continuous opportunity, we linked them up with leaders who are outside the academic field and had them interact. Eventually what happened is that they created their own sub-networks, and the women had their own projects they co-created, which I think is very important. So it's not enough just to do advocacy at the policy level, talking, what scientists like to call talking, but it's important to co-create together, to publish together, to tackle the issues of sexual harassment together, to bring in female leaders like myself who are not directly doing research, but who have very strong networks and can actually call up someone and say, hey, you know, this problem is coming up with a lot at your university, what can be done? So I think it's very important to find great networks and fund them and help them, and also have African leaders run those programs, because that's also another problem that we have. We have Western leaders parachuted and lead programs, and also mix people in the networking, have very clear advocacy goals, because one of the things that happens is there's so many goals that you do not have a thing that you're asking for. Very clear advocacy goals. What does this network want to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And finally, I think quickly, the mentorship aspect I think is very interesting, because I think I'm not sure we do mentorship very well. I think successful programs have kind of done it by accident. And I think as you pilot different things, the things that work should be the ones that you focus and put strength in. But I feel like a lot of organizations that do these programs or who are trying are doing it at a very clinical level. Whereas a good mentor, in general, as I think Fiona brought up, a good mentor is someone who helps you. For example, a lot of the mentorship I do now with female scientists, I don't have many left, but I tell them directly, like, how do you ask for a raise? How do you tackle the fact that you're not well paid? How do you talk to your spouse? How do you, there's so many things that are outside of the academic world where you need somebody to support you. And I feel like we focus a lot on how do we get them through the PhD program? And when they get through the PhD program, they either never publish again, or they come off, or they become gatekeepers themselves in the department. So long-winded response there. But I think finding networks, finding the ones that work, and really building them around co-creating knowledge, co-creating policies, clear advocacy goals, and then fun things. I advocate for fun things when communities gather, and it works wonders. It's amazing how much it works to keep women together and help them decompress from a very stressful academic life or research life.
Thank you, Natalie. Indeed, let's make it fun as well as we do it. So, Fiona, please, how can we leverage existing networks? Natalie has said that sometimes, she's talked about sometimes a good network comes and then after 2 years it winds up and it's not there anymore. Can you strengthen that?
Yeah, I think Natalie's touched on a lot of things that are so important. I think really, identifying individuals, institutions, universities, ministries who are really, really strong, advocates for having women in research and in the higher education sector. I think identifying those key allies is really important, and identifying those networks and joining them and strengthening them, and totally make it fun. The whole thing is that we want to create exactly this bonding within a network, so that it does last beyond those 2 years, beyond a funding period. Like, it can go beyond that. Sharing knowledge, sharing across fields. I love the fact that you said that, Natalie. I think that's really important. That science. I think even what Andrea said right at the beginning. Science, it sometimes can be quite constricted, and this broader sense of research and bringing people from different fields, different backgrounds together who have similar passions, similar ideas, and that I think is what will keep existing networks strong and keep them alive for longer periods of time. In terms of leveraging these networks, I think right now in this day and age of COVID and everything being online, leverage these systems. We can actually connect with people across the world right now, instantly. Can we use this as to an advantage to really build networks, maybe that go beyond our geographical constraints, and really use these kind of platforms, using even WhatsApp, using something like that to really create a network of people where we can communicate. I can ask you, I'm struggling with this, or whether it doesn't have to be academic, it doesn't have to be research, as even Natalie pointed as well, using these platforms to really connect with other female researchers and building this bond. Yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of leverage these networks, really. Yeah, continue using even online e-learning platforms that are so helpful. Yeah, thanks, Doreen.
Thank you, Fiona. I have a request. I am seeing a very high possibility and likelihood that we'll go above time. This event was supposed to end at 5:30 and it's now 5:22, so we only have about 8 minutes, and I want to beg of your indulgence if you can give us about 20 more minutes, because I still have 3 questions for the panelists, and I want to turn to the audience questions so that we get to hear some of the questions that the participants are saying that have not been responded to. I hope it's okay with you if you go overboard by 20 minutes. Thank you. And so I want to start with a question here from Catherine, which is that one is very simple for me to answer. Catherine Eswola, I hope I pronounced your name well. How can I apply for award mentoring program? Please keep checking our website. We do have every now and then announce a call for application for our programs. They are all competitive. So one of the best ways to get to know when this happens is to subscribe to our newsletter so that you can get to know when the call is open. So for you, please, I will request you to go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter. Then I'll start with a question from Shelmith. Shelmith is asking, what is your take on the fact that some of us women in sub-Saharan Africa have had a very long walk to achieve our PhDs, and thus our age is not below 35 or 40 years, which is mostly an eligibility criteria with many of the postdoc research opportunities? Oh, Shelmith, I believe there's a lot of discussions that have been going on in the chats about the age limit. If you'll allow me to skip that and go to the next one from Abimbola. Unless there's a panelist who want to speak to this, please just let me know. I'll go to the next question from somebody called Uzoma. Can someone suggest a good funding body to sponsor a research on rural girl education STEM and how this affects entrance and performance in tertiary institutions? Uzoma wants recommendations on funding bodies to sponsor research. I know that Mawazo Institute always have, they share opportunities, funding opportunities. We also do share, but I know Mawazo Institute have a list where they usually share, and Fiona can talk to that. And then another question from Peter. How do we overcome the cultural barriers which favor one gender over the other? Anybody wants to take Peter Njuho's question on cultural barriers? And then there's a question here, who should take up responsibility for sex for marks issues? This causes stagnation for most women. So I have two questions that I'm requesting someone to take them up, one of the panelists, and asking Fiona to talk to the issue of funding bodies.
Can I tackle the sex for marks and there's a question around spouses. So I mean, yes, that one, go ahead. The spouse question, or is a difficult one because it's a hard one to answer if you're already married. But I've always encouraged every young person. I generally speak quite often to our students, female students, around this. The decision around who you continue with, partner with you in your life, is very important because it's a make or break thing often. You're taking two people who come from different family types, sometimes even cultural backgrounds. So it's a difficult question to answer once you're married. But I think it's very important to try and answer it from a perspective of, how do you demonstrate that this is valuable for the family? That's the only thing I can think of, and what we've seen that works. And no one goes against their own interest if it's in the interest of the family and themselves. And I think other than that, it's a tough situation. It has to be a one-on-one. On the sex for marks question, I think that this is an institutional question, and I always say that I'm very much for affirmative action because I feel that funders here have a lot of power to kind of push institutions, academic research institutions, research programs, to really tackle these issues by looking at them systematically. Like the institution that I'm about to fund, how are they doing on these questions? How many female leaders do they have? Do they have history of this question? Interviewing some of the female scientists and researchers they have on board to get an impression, and this is a way that funders can really support. But also joining wider networks, as I mentioned, allows you to advocate for broader issues like this that are a very big challenge. And they start so early. By the time you're at a postgraduate level, it's just, you're so discouraged. And it really does ruin people's lives and makes them leave research. I work my background is mostly journalism, and you cannot imagine the amount of women who leave journalism just because of this issue. So I think it's important to join networks that can have a say on this, that have clear advocacy goal. But here I think it is a strong, it's something that funders can really work with and help people reform and create systems. At Kepler, we have a very strong process around that. And even if it's something where we're not sure, we do a lot of work and even training further the people who are concerned to show how this could be mistaken for harassment. So yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. Fiona, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think I answered the Q&A question there with regards to whether you can find opportunities, because I think that's one big issue. We don't know where do we find these opportunities? Like, they're not, how accessible are they? And we try a lot at Moazo to ensure that these opportunities not only live on our website, but like are being put out there through social media, so they're reaching as many people as possible, so that they are aware of these opportunities and they can, go for them.
Okay. There was a question from Peter Njuho about cultural barriers. Peter Njuho was asking how we can overcome cultural barriers which favor one gender over the other. If there's anybody who would like to answer that question, please do.
I think I can start maybe, and I think this is something, again, that a couple of the panelists have also touched on, and is this whole thing of really tackling these gender stereotypes, particularly in research. Like, how can we really show that it's okay and normalize it to see a woman scientist, to see a woman professor, and really make it normal? I mean, it's really difficult. This is the stuff is going to be generationally, it maybe might change over generations. Changing behavior is incredibly difficult, but I think we just need to be resilient. We just need to continue pushing for public engagement, pushing the work of female researchers into people's everyday lives, beyond just the academic world and ecosystem, really going out there getting into people's homes, having female scientists being shown on kids' TV shows, having women scientists writing articles in your daily newspaper, things like that. That's, I think, is the way that we're going to normalize having women as scientists. Like, that should not be something that is so rare. But I can tell you, even just for myself, I came home with my PhD, and the first thing my grandmother asked me, is, when am I getting married and when are you having kids? It was not even a case of like, congratulations, this is so impressive. No, it was like, next thing, where, there's this pressure that we have. And even though maybe now less and less it's unsaid, it's still there. And so I guess this networking, having that really supportive system. And like I'll say again, this public engagement and pushing women out there is just so important to make it normal, so people don't even think it's like a big deal anymore, and I think that's maybe how we can really address these cultural issues. And I guess also, that being said, I think we also still have to be sensitive to cultural norms, and continuing to allow for that flexibility for women. Why are we so worried about somebody finishing their PhD in 4 years or 3 years or 6 years? Like, those things shouldn't be a kind of a measure of how good of a student or how good of a researcher that person is. So, is there a way that we can change these kind of unsaid kind of things within research that say, oh, I'm better than you because I have more peer-reviewed papers or something like that? Like, just changing that and just taking people based on how good their research is, and not only limiting it to certain criteria that we've put. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Darren, could I add to that very briefly?
Sure, Moses, yes.
Yeah, no, I was, and thanks to Fiona. I just wanted to just quickly add to Peter that I think it's also trying to ensure that maybe we focus at the different niches that we are dealing with, because I think the word cultural is such a huge word, as Fiona has hinted to. It has, a societal implication, it has a home implication, it has a institutional, but I think it's good also to target it within the niche where we're dealing with it. So in this case, if we're talking about institutions, if we're talking about the higher education institutions, if we're talking about research institutions, I think that's an easy place to start tackling these issues. by creating norms within those institutions, whether that means setting policies, building capacity, trying to really support, maybe provide training, awareness activities, so that people understand. Remember that we come from different places. Some people have grown up in rural, very rural backgrounds where the culture was much stronger in a different way. And those who have lived in town, maybe in a different way. So there's so many things that are coming together, just like Natalie talked about marriage. So when we come to these institutions, whether you're working in a research institution or you go to a university, you're dealing with people who come from many backgrounds. And I think this also comes back to the issue of sexual harassment. The expectation is different for different people. And so you have to set the norms and make them very clear that it is not okay to do certain things. It is okay to do certain things. So those have to be very clear. So some people maybe will harass. Sexual harassment may occur because someone thinks it's not sexual harassment. So the first thing is to be very clear what is sexual harassment. So I think all these things have to be clear in terms of policy, in terms of safeguarding. So what happens if this happens? Where do you go? Do you have open spaces where people can report and there's no stigma or nothing comes back on you because you reported against the vice chancellor of your institution who did something that he shouldn't have done. Yeah.
And just quickly, Doreen, I think often there's also a power imbalance between if you're running a project or on a project where there's other female scientists from Europe and the US. You know, I've noticed it as well in my teams where you have someone who is from Chicago working with someone who's from rural Kenya. And the talk time of the female scientists, the work, the visibility is so different. And so I think there are multiple levels to some of these power imbalances. And it's very important that whether it's at the funding level or even people who are organizing these projects, it's very clear from both sides how the interaction wants to be. And people shouldn't feel like their culture is, we have to throw out, if I want to be part of this program, I have to throw out my culture, you know. Many African women are happy, they want to be married, they want to have children. This should not be something that should be looked down upon. I think it's, as Moses said, very clear points around this is what we are trying to do and this is what we believe in. But we have to be careful that it doesn't become a discourse where we're saying, oh no, if you don't even think about this, you'll get ahead. And I've noticed that, and I've had to correct that to say, hey, you're talking actually 50% more than your colleague here. And you know, they're not here just to take data. So I think African women also have to leverage the networks they have to kind of push back on some of these issues and say, hey, we don't continually have the spokesperson of projects be someone who's based in Chicago or based in Milan, or you know. So yeah.
Yeah, very important. Also, that's why it's important to empower African women. You talked about earlier, you talked about leadership trainings, negotiations trainings, important. I can see Anthony's hand is up. I know, Anthony, I assume you want to react to one of the questions. And as you do that, I'd like you to respond to the last question that I had for you as we now wind up this phase of the program. As the apex body that is charged with the mandate of overseeing graduate training in Africa, how is Reforum supporting higher learning institutions to prevent the pipe from leaking further? Anthony.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted first to start with the issue of cultural, the cultural issue. I think for me, two things. First one is we really need to understand our cultural norms, values, and value systems, and then begin to identify those that work for us and those that work against us. And even those that work against us, we then need to begin to see this can easily be tackled, because if we try to tackle all of them at once, and the noise will be too much at the end of it all, that we will not be able to make a significant leap. So tackle those that can easily be first delivered, and then we begin to get a leap forward and begin to celebrate those successes. There is power in seeing it is possible. There is power in seeing and celebrating success. And so with that comes at the issue of our traditional norm, our traditional cultural institutions, for example. I think part of the issue and the conversations is that for most of our processes in education and so forth, we've tried to detach ourselves as African people from our cultural institutions. Now, those cultural institutions and cultural leaders have a very enormous and strong power that it doesn't matter whether the president will speak. When the Council of Elders sit, they will pass a resolution that is completely different from what the law of the land actually says. So how do we begin to have real conversations and bring them to the table to have a conversation, and then have them as, you know, people to champion some of these? We need more women into education. We need them to recognize and celebrate women who have made it. We need them to invite women to their headquarters and showcase them. So this, for me, will help us to begin to have a concrete motion with our cultural institutions. Because on one hand, we seem to be moving, but on the other hand, there's a bit of life contradictions with the normality of society on the other side of the fence. Okay, so how is RU Forum acting in terms of ensuring to support institutions of higher learning? First is that there is the principle and the process of working together as a network. And that therefore means that we come together and share, build capacity together. And that has been part and parcel. If you compare, for example, in terms of resource flow, those that come to the universities vis-a-vis those that come to the secretariat, because we recognize the strength of bringing our network to work together towards a common goal. So we work together to raise resources so that resources are channeled to the universities to be able to do specific work in terms of particular priority areas. Of course, based on the strategy that the network has defined. Currently, we are implementing the Vision 2030 of the RU Forum network. Now that celebrates co-creation, co-evolution, and co-development of actions with our member universities. The second one is really in program evolution. And I would like to touch this in program evolution in terms of these soft skills, because that in itself is an important part for transitions. We traditionally first used to focus on academic support skills, data analysis, and so forth. But gradually we have noticed and appreciated soft skills beyond those hardcore skills, and therefore organize issues relating to social, organizational, and personal development, issues on preparation for transition, for university students, but also leadership. I know a word, for example, has been very instrumental in the leadership training for our graduate students, but also PASGAR in Nairobi and other in the UK. We've been working with other institutions on the leadership development for university vice chancellors, university deans and principals, as well as heads of department. The idea is really begin to appreciate and say thought leadership is a very important facet for institutional transformation. And if we don't invest in it, then we are breeding weaker institutions within an ministers. The third issue as Rule Forum, where we have been playing a part, is really in terms of working and getting issues around policy advocacy. And that is a very key issue because within the power of the network, we are able to reach out to various governments and therefore begin to bring them on board to invest in priority areas within different institutions and within their respective countries. Now, because that begins to enable and open windows for universities to internally prioritize with their respective countries, but also build regional programs in which there is cross-learning across the continent. The idea of saying, can we get young Africans and African researchers who work with fellow Africans and know Africa better, is at the core of that engagement with policy and also engaging in networking and advocacy. And finally, is probably the issue that we are lately trying to put and push a lot, is within the issue of private sector. The conversation with the private sector is that really universities can't do without the private sector, but universities have a blossoming private sector, and likely because we want to be able to be responsive to the challenge that universities are always being blamed for, that we are always outputting graduates that are largely job seekers. So it is important within this consideration to bring the conversation between universities and private sector to see how best issues are really dealt with and build an ecosystem that where universities and private sector work together and much more closely. So with these 4 issues, I would like to stop there.
Thank you very much, Anthony. The issue of co-creation has been coming up consistently, and I'm glad to hear that you're also pursuing the same and working closely with the higher institutions of learning to co-create solutions that would help them and help us plug this gender gap. And now I want to shift gears. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are having this conversation as part of the closing ceremony of the leadership program that has been going on for the past 2 months, which targeted women in emerging women in science who are in just at the start of their careers in science. And we had 24 women participating in this program, and we want to hear from them. So I'd like to request Elizabeth from Senegal, Georgina Rono from Kenya, and Mukoka Chisomo from Malawi to please join me to share with us and the rest of the participants who are here today about how this program has really turbocharged them to now go on and advance their careers in science. And if you can have Elizabeth on, Mukoka, Chisomo, and Georgina. I'm going to start with Georgina. Georgina, what is the one thing? Yeah, hello, Georgina.
Yeah.
Great to have you here. And
thank you.
We are proud of you as one of the 24 who've successfully gone through this program. And we just wanted to hear from you. We've had consistently people talking about the need for leadership programs, for the need for mentoring programs, the need to equip women to be able to be better communicators and to increase the visibility of women in science. What is the one thing that you can say was a light bulb moment for you during this course?
Okay, what really got me was when we started the course and we did the purpose roadmap. Mm-hmm. That was a tool that shows you where you should be, what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and then you're guided on the things you need on the way, the people you might need, and the timelines. And right now in the group, people are talking so much about the age limit, and in the purpose roadmap, there was we were indicating the time it will take to do something to achieve your PhD, your master's, and everything. And that really got to me, looking at where I am as a mother, as a wife. Then I have my studies, I have to work. So I feel that really got to to a point where I looked at myself as a woman, and I feel there is so much that need to be done. And I don't know if we should delay marriage or have kids later, I don't know. But I feel this course was very important, and that was the moment I got to realize it myself and where I really should be at what time and the time I have. So with age limit and everything, I think we got equipped on how to maneuver and how to manage our time.
I'm glad to hear that, Georgina. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I want to turn to Elizabeth from Senegal. Elizabeth, what has been your biggest fear or obstacle as you ventured to a career in science? And what have you learned from this program?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So personally, my biggest fear when I ventured in a career in science was access to research in a timely manner in the concept of Africa, doing research in Africa. I'm a plant breeder. But however, I was one of those privileged enough to have international collaborators, so I was able to do research in a setting like that. But I do acknowledge that it's actually a challenge that young people can face when they want to do career in science, because without resources, and the time is important, you can have the means to get those resources, but if you don't get them on time, it actually sets you back in terms of where you want to be in terms of your career. So definitely, as I look back and as I am interested in giving back to the community, I think there should be a way to help young people so that doesn't become an obstacle for them to do science.
Wow, really encouraging hearing that you want to take back the ladder and to hold someone's hand. And I'm wondering if you could share with us how this program has equipped you to pursue the next steps in your career.
So I am really grateful that I should start there for the past 2 months training that we received. I've never been into a leadership mentoring program, so this was really very beneficial. There are some steps as a scientist, which are, let's say I want to attract funding. I want to be able to do research. And in order to do that, I need funding. And one of the key things that we learned during this program was how to develop a good proposal and how to convince the donor that this research, this idea that I'm bringing forward actually should be funded, and it can impact the community. So definitely that award has put that basis in me. And also one thing also that I really liked during this program was the coaching part, where we highlighted the importance of mentoring. And I thank Salome really passing for the time that she took really to work with me in a one-on-one setting. And that part really helped me shape my goals better. I know where I want to be. So I was able to define a 10-year career plan at the end of this coaching session, which I never did before. So I know, okay, this is what I want to do. 2022, this is my goal. How do I get to that goal in 2022? What are the skills that I need? If I don't have them, what are the steps that I need to take in order to get those skills in order to reach my goal? And also one thing is important is to surround myself with the right people that will help me reach that goal. So our award that has done that for me, has set the basis for that. Thank you.
Indeed, very important to plan, just like Georgina has said, planning, having a plan, a career plan and a purpose roadmap. Where do you want to go and how do you get there? And I want to invite Mukoka to share with us about, again, also, if you could tell us what is the one thing that, you started participating in this program, it was like, that's the light bulb moment for you.
Okay, hello. So the light bulb moment for me was also the purpose roadmap. So this indicated to me that change is supposed to be planned. You have to know the actions that you need to get to where you want to be. You have to set the time. You have to recognize what resources you would need to get to those steps. So during that time, I was deliberate in my thinking to know, okay, I want to get here, but how do I get there? So it was a time for me to actually plan of what I want to be. So it was a moment that for the first time ever, I have always known what I wanted to be, but this was a time that I had to really think of the steps that I have to take to actually see change come to pass.
I see. Again, the issue of planning, where do you want to go and how do you want to go there is coming up. The issue of networking, I like that you have benefited from getting that exposure and knowing the value of that. And as we've closed this session of interacting with you who have been participating in this program, I want to ask Georgina. Georgina, if you could share with us, how has this program equipped you to pursue the next steps in your career now that you have a beautifully outlined purpose roadmap?
Yeah. First, I would say the society should realize that women play a role in progress and sustainability of the world. And the program, award program, it came at the right time when I really needed. It was like timely, because I was like, I'm done with the family, like no much attention was needed from me from the family, so I wanted to focus on my career, and then award came, which I'm so. I got the skills, move to the next step, the writing skill. I need to equip myself with that. Another thing was how to navigate gender dynamics and leadership dynamics. At the moment, I feel I'm a better person. I know how to handle these gender issues. We've talked about even right now, everybody's loud about it. And award really equipped us on how we can navigate through that. Another important skill that award equipped us with was how to remain visible as a scientist. Now I realize the importance of mentorship. There are so many girls out there who are looking up to, they're looking for someone, a woman who has done this, a woman who has achieved this, and then they look at themselves and they realize they can also do it. So I'd also request everyone here, any woman that you're in science, remain visible, post about sciences, meet those girls and everything. Because for me, this was my first mentorship, and I'm a totally different person as we speak right now. I want to be at that policy making table and change the issue of age limit and everything, and be so vocal about having women in science progress and make changes in their field. And I'm so grateful to Award for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Georgina. Hopefully we've catalyzed a mentoring relationship somewhere. I can see Anthony saying he wants to sign off. Actually, I'm sure many of us want to sign off, and we are coming to the very tail end of this. I really want to say a big thank you to all my panelists. A big thank you to everyone for your time, for preparing, for sharing with us your wisdom, your thoughts, your experiences, and for a very interactive session that we've had so far. I'd like at this point to acknowledge the trainers who delivered this training. And then after that, I'll request Esther to give an announcement before I call my acting director to close the event. So the 2-month training that has been going on, where Georgina, Elizabeth, and Mukoka have been participating, was made possible by a team from the award training unit that have worked tirelessly to put together that program, to put together the training material, the curriculum, and to deliver the 2-month training. And we are hearing the testimonials here of people saying they really enjoyed. And so I want to say a very big thank you to the trainers. And I'll start with Dr. Salome Gitoho. Dr. Salome Gitoho, if you could please turn on your camera for our audience to see you. Dr. Salome Gitoho is from Kenya, and she's an author, a mediator, a trainer, and a facilitator. She's a lecturer with over 30 years of experience in leadership, governance, and organizational development. She was leading the team in the leadership training course, and she brings in a lot of knowledge and in organizational development, leadership and management, and strategy formulation to the award team of trainers. Thank you so much, Salome. The next trainer is Dr. Florence Ambayo. Dr. Florence Ambayo, good to see you. Dr. Florence Ambayo is also from Kenya. Dr. Florence Ambayo holds a doctorate in clinical psychology from the United States International University, and she's an accredited coach, trainer, and facilitator. She's also a mental health expert who is passionate about trauma and family therapy. There was a chat, there was somebody who had posted in the chat that we also need to remember the mental health issues. I'm sure Florence was happy to see that. And she facilitates the leadership and mentoring courses. Thank you, Florence. Then we have Professor Ivy Drafo Amenya from Ghana. Professor Ivy Drafo Amenya is an associate professor of agricultural economics at Pentecost University College in Ghana. She has served as a proposal writing coach for several local and international organizations, among them IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute. She specializes in the leadership, mentoring, and science series courses in the award team of trainers. Thank you, Ivy. Then we have Dr. Richard Miro from Uganda. Dr. Richard Miro is an experienced researcher, academic trainer, and a facilitator of change processes for farmers' organizations, innovation platforms, and gender-responsive processes. He brings to the A team a rich experience in agricultural research and extension systems, and he trains in the science skills series, leadership series, and gender in agricultural research series. Thank you, Richard. Good to see you. And then finally, we have Siaka Kulibali from Burkina Faso. Bonjour, Siaka. Siaka is an experienced language and cross culture trainer. He's also an expert curriculum development and design specialist. As a member of the team of trainers at Award, Mr. Siaka is a mentoring and leadership coach, and he brings a wealth of experience to the team in leadership, mentoring, and diversity and inclusion. Thank you so much, Siaka. And now,
Merci
friends, merci. With huge apologies for going overboard for time, I'd like to invite my colleague, Esther Jeru. Esther Jeru is a senior officer for training and development, and Esther has a few announcements to share with the participants of the training program. And after that, I'll invite Dorothy Mukedi, who is our acting director at Award.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Esther Njeru, and I'm really delighted to see all of you. Thank you for gracing this webinar. It's been really interesting. And it's been a journey the last 2 months, having those young ladies, those vibrant minds. And I've really enjoyed the discussions. It has really validated and affirmed a lot of experiences we had during the training program, because these women are not just homogeneous. We say 35 and below in STEM, you have a PhD, a master's, but then as we interacted with them, then you realize that they come in with multiple identities, the intersectionalities that they come with, that they face each day. We had 3 women with young baby, one very like a few weeks old, and we are adapting them as the STEM babies. And the beauty of it is there is no shame or feeling you're not professional because you came in and we need to give you extra breaks to breastfeed. We embrace that because that's the only way we can give you a level platform. And it's been really interesting that as we plan how to bridge that gap, that we know this person will be, yes, she's a woman, she probably has physical challenges, she probably is struggling with certain culture, she's struggling with a lot of dynamics. So as we seek to seek that gap, it's important for all of us. And I'm really excited to hear all those things being articulated. And we also have something about the age limit, and it comes with a lot of maybe the directives we get from our development partners. But knowledge is free, you can give. We've equipped you, we've equipped those women, and they are able to also go and share out there their knowledge and really grow another woman who may not have those chances. So I want to congratulate the team of 24 ladies who have successfully gone through this program. They're from 10 African countries. Congratulations, you've hanged in there. You've done great. There they are, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful minds. And you've hanged in there with your challenges, with families, and everything that else that you had to go through. And we'll be sending you your certificates of participation. We'll be sending you an evaluation form just to give us feedback. What did we do well? Where can we improve? What else would you want to see in another program? And really to wish you well and tell you now, go light that candle. Light that candle for that woman who may not have a clear vision to see her dream. Light that candle for that woman whose stride may not be as strong that she may find her clear direction. Light that candle that all that brilliance will bring a lot of synergy and collaboration among women that we may bridge the gap that we are seeking to bridge. Thank you very much, and I wish you well and God's blessings. Over to you, Doreen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther, and congratulations to the 24 women, young women from 10 African countries on successfully completing your capacity building program. Thank you. Congratulations. I know that I had told my panelists that they will have an opportunity to give their parting shots, but I unfortunately have to take that time because we have gone overboard. And now I'm just going to invite Dorothy Muhebi, who is the Deputy Director in charge of operations at Award and also the Acting Director at Award, to come and give the vote of thanks and closing remarks. Karibu, Dorothy.
Thank you, Doreen. And I hope you can see me. Good afternoon, everyone. And as you've heard, my name is Dorothy Muhebi. And today I'm privileged and really delighted to be with you as we bring to an end both the Award Leadership Training Program and this webinar that we've just experienced that is trying to address the systemic causes of the gender gap in science. We've been very privileged to interact with distinguished speakers who are also friends of Award. I could go on, I could stay here forever to listen to all of them: Andrea, Moses, Natalie, Anthony, and Fiona. What a great afternoon. I just have sat and listened, not also to forget the active messages that the interactions that were going on. I have not read all of them, but so much was being said. So I note also from the screen that apart from the course participants and the speakers and Award staff, we are also privileged to have so many of our partners from across the continent and the globe. And I also like to single out, of course, our partners, Roof Forum and ISIPE, that you've brought in a lot of participants in your right as friends of Award. I just want to welcome you all and also acknowledge your presence. I think our common thread and the reason why we are gathered here, both for the training and for this interaction, is the low numbers of women in science and technology, engineering and mathematics, STEM, and how can we get these numbers to increase, but also to support the women in the various aspects of their career. And so much has been said, and so much has been said before. And I hope we can document that. And we know that Award under the Global Forum for Women in Science and Research, what we call Go for Wiser, that's the acronym, has been a thought leader or has provided the thought leadership in the ARD sector as a contribution towards bridging the gap in STEM, because our mandate is mainly ARD. And we had a very successful Go for Wiser meeting, which was held in Dakar in 2019. And the initial conceptualization was in 2018. And groups, partners like PASET, who are also represented here, were part of that meeting, and they supported the Award in holding that interaction. And it is really the success of that Go for Wiser in we can call it the Dakar meeting, that really energized Award to pursue our contributions to STEM with a focus on our ARD. So the Go for Wiser has become a big initiative within the award activities. So from our deliberations, from what we know before, we are all very familiar and we are all, I think, very knowledgeable, and today has confirmed it, and why the numbers are low, and how to increase the numbers of women in STEM, and how to deal with some of the challenges that the women face. And you see, as a award, we have designed, I think, Go for Wiser as a thought leader to address the systemic causes of the gender gap in STEM, and also to highlight the strategies and approaches that can improve the numbers of women in STEM. So that is easy. But I think my challenge for you, everyone who is here, is, as we end this session, is what are we going to do differently to ensure that we close this gap, given what we've discussed, how we've interacted? And is it just about the numbers? Because there's a lot of emphasis on numbers. And I think somewhere in the text, it says that women make up 30% of the researchers in STEM. So what if those numbers became 50? Or even if it was 70%, would we have succeeded in what we are trying to do? That is a question we need to ask ourselves. And what is our goal? And is it just the numbers? If we have the numbers, would we have succeeded in what we are trying to do and what we are targeting? So for me, I'm very pleased actually to note that, I don't know whether it was by design, Doreen, that most of the experts actually on the panel and many of the participants, including Award, we are all involved in supporting or building capacity initiatives that target fellowships in our institutions. Some of them are, focusing on only particular groups of researchers, but we are all involved in capacity building in one way or the other. So the concern I have is, as we continue to do this noble work as institutions and interventions, which Andrea said it very well, at individual level, at organizational level, and at the systemic level, is how are we going to contextualize the way we approach the challenges? Moses said something that really talked to me well, is the family. The family, like I asked myself, is it bad to take 6 years for a woman to finish her PhD instead of the typically 3 years? Is it 6 years because she's being harassed by her supervisor, or is it 6 because she's balancing between her family, her own time, and her academic work? So we shouldn't just be going to look at the numbers and saying, okay, I took 6 years and we should take 3 years as women also. Let's look at it in the right context. And I also like that intervention that the family support, and I think it's Natalie again who talked about involving the family when women get into this program. It seems to work better. Yeah, so let's look beyond just looking at the numbers and trying to achieve whatever it is. And look at not just women as uniform, and look at other disadvantaged groups that I think it's Anthony who highlighted that should it just be women that we should be focusing on. But of course, there's a lot of discussions that have gone on, which I've noted on age, sexism, sexual harassment. There was a lot about mentoring and the enabling environment, cultural barriers. Yeah, so it's not something new, but it's something that we take up as a ward and as our partners, as we design our interventions in building capacities of and making sure that the gender gap is reduced. And the issue of age actually is not as simple as that, because I worked in the ministry when most fellowships used to support families, and supporting families meant 5 individuals. And the decision was, you support one individual to go for a fellowship, their PhD in another country, or or do you support that support 5 scientists who leave their families behind? And what is the return on investment, given that the government also has very limited resources? So there's no one clear answer to say it is good or it's bad. There's a reason why there's an age limit, but we also have to consider that some women also have their challenges, that maybe they're having they're doing the academic work after they're having their families. And I think the 3 participants have put it so well. Georgina, I really like your intervention about being a mother, a wife, and then career. And now that you've dealt with your family issues, you can now focus on your career, which is good. You don't have to just get up and say, I must do my career before, and I put my family aside. You know, so these are some of the questions that we need to keep asking ourselves. What is so unique about these women we are talking about? Even amongst the women, that we need to ensure that there's diversity and inclusion. And what do I mean? Some of us who are here in this panel, or some of the women you see, how many of us really know what hunger is? How many of us walked barefoot going to school for long distances? So when we are choosing, saying that 30% of the participants, or we've chosen to do, let's say on a program like PASET, you may be choosing 30% of the elite women. So we really have to be careful also when we talk about numbers. We have to look at it with different lenses so that we really focus and make sure that the most vulnerable are not left behind. And I was even thinking about the issue of sex for marks, because it was a very animated discussion. Is it the lady who is being harassed who needs mentoring? Or is this a gentleman who is harassing the lady that needs mentoring? Maybe he was never mentored, and for him, harassing a lady is normal. So we also have to think carefully about our interventions. So anyway, as a word, our aspirations is to see an equitable world, especially in the ARD sector, and of course with that in STEM. So something else that also I don't want us to miss out was somebody highlighted something about knowledge sharing, and our word is also quite strong on that, both the communication and monitoring and evaluation. And Doreen said it very at the beginning, we are very active on social media right now. So we should be sharing already the new lessons we've learned today, what we're going to do differently, what we have seen that we can intervene to make sure that we have an equitable world. So knowledge sharing is important, and also recording what has come out of this meeting. So with that, just finally, I just want to maybe appreciate all of you. My gratitude goes out to all the participants who have taken their time from your busy schedules to be part of this dialogue this afternoon. As Doreen said, we may have gone a bit off time, but we really appreciate you. In particular, I want to appreciate the course participants, the young ladies that attended the leadership course that has gone on for 2 months. Yeah, it has been spread over 2 months, and also now have been able to participate this afternoon. I can't say enough thank you to the panelists, Moses, Osiru, Natalie, Anthony, Fiona. Have I forgotten any of you? You're just, yeah, I don't know, but it is really, yeah, Andrea, you set the tone. It's just, I have my notes here from what you said, the first one of referring to research, not science. It was such a great panel discussion. I would like to acknowledge the facilitators because they've also been around for 2 months, Salome, Florence, Richard, and Siaka. You are so passionate about what you do, your professionalism, your willingness, and we don't even have to be told, we don't even need the evaluation. The 3 participants, when they talked about the purpose roadmap, planning, time management, resources, and steps, I said, wow, this is what you call good lessons from the training. I acknowledge the award team, Doreen, for your visionary leadership. Not only today, but from 2008, when the seed for Go for Wiser was sown. The other award team members, there's all of them. There's so many, I can't really mention all of them, but the training team, the operations and administration team, the monitoring and evaluation team, We have a big team behind the scenes, the technical team, who make sure that this happens. I want to appreciate all of them. And then finally, our special appreciation goes to Andrea Johnson and the Carnegie Corporation of New York. If it was possible, we would give her a standing ovation. Doreen, I don't know what we can give to Andrea, but Andrea, thank you. Thank you very much for your support, both as an organization and yourself individually. You have supported us through the 3-year journey. You have believed in us. You not only provided resources to make this happen, you have been present to participate in your own capacity as a professional. We appreciate your passion and we thank you. Thank you, Andrea. And with that, I can declare this session closed and wish you a pleasant evening or morning or night for those of you who are not on our time zone. So thank you and thank you. Back to you, Doreen.
Protocol says that I cannot speak after you declare the session closed.
No, you can.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. We are requesting for your feedback on the chat. My colleague David has posted a link. Please tell us about your experience. Please talk to us. So it's there on the chat. Go to the link and give us your feedback. And thank you very much. Have a good evening, a good day, a good afternoon.
There are so many messages, you may have to repost it.
Yes, he's been reposting. He's been reposting. Yeah. And we will be sharing with you the notes from this event. A report will be sharing to all the participants. So look out for that as well. And so this is to say bye-bye for today.